Call this meeting to order for the Planning Commission, Wednesday, February 21, 2024. This is a regular meeting. Roll call. Oh, and it's 6 p.m.
Braddock. Here. Buck.
Here.
Detmer. Here. McSweeney.
Here.
Meridian.
Here.
Newman.
Here.
Paul.
Here.
Robson.
Present.
Wilmot.
Here. Okay, approval of minutes for the December 13th, 2023 meeting. Any corrections, changes, comments? Take a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the December 13, 2023 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Support.
Okay. Ted Paul makes the motion. Charlie Wilmot seconds it to approve the minutes. All in favor, raise your hands. Aye. Everyone has their hand raised. All right, moving on to old business. We start off with a public hearing on electric vehicle charging stations. Ordinance language. Do we have anyone online? Okay, so if you want to just give a quick summary, John.
Yes, I can. Since the last planning commission meeting, the ordinance was distributed by the city manager to members of city council for their review and comment. And I did receive comments from councilperson Demore, and those are in red in the ordinance that's before you this evening. And those comments were provided some additional clarity on some of the provisions. And so I think the ordinance that's being presented to you right now with the amended revisions is the one that the planning commission should consider as part of the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will officially open the floor for the public hearing at 6:02 p.m. And is anyone here to make public comments? Okay, I will close the public hearing at 6:02 p.m. And we will move on to the commission to talk about the EV ordinance language. Ted?
I had a couple, John. One question or comment I had, a lot of this focus seemed to be on safety, and I thought installing them correctly and safely. So it just, I was trying to struggle with the notion, it's number 50, line 55, about grandfathering. And typically in the city, we grandfather a lot of things in. I just was a little uneasy about this since it could be a safety issue. Is that really something you should grandfather in, or should your ordinance really ask people who have installed them to have them inspected?
You know, that's a good comment, good observation. The reason why I put it in, because we really don't know who has them.
Right, it would be a self-reporting.
It'd be a self-reported, yes. So that's why I put the section in there that prior to the installation, it would be grandfathered in. Because the people that did install them they never received any permits.
Right.
So we don't know where they're at and how many there are.
Could we add language, delete the use that same last sentence that ends in replacement, delete the period and say provided as it is in compliance with current electrical safety standards?
That's what I was just gonna say is that, you know, these are relatively new, you know, product or item, and so they would have pulled electrical permits to install them in theory. And so they would be up to date. And they'd be.
So it's not,
They would have been inspected, you know, by a county electrical inspector, so.
I guess that would be,
It's not like there's something left over from 20 years ago.
right, okay,
But some could be self-installed though, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know.
I would be willing to bet they're self-installed.
Oh, I would think that some of them are self-installed.
Yeah.
So would that kind of language be helpful, or do we leave it as?
Run that by me again, Madam Chair.
Provided it is in compliance with current electrical safety standards. I don't know how the rest of the commission.
Unless you want to get specific and say electrical code standards.
Okay,
Yeah.
I do too. Electrical code standards.
Well-
Usually the standard at the end, it was. Electrical code.
All right,
Right, that should
I
be,
don't think you need the word current because the code is the code.
right,
Then I think we have it. It's obviously probably a self-reporting thing, but it's. The ordinance looks like you're trying to encourage people to
Yes,
comply or get it. Have something that's up to
yeah,
code.
and I'll make that change before it goes to council.
I guess you should put the in front of electrical code. And what state electrical code, county electrical code, doesn't matter.
It's really the international
yeah,
electrical code.
it's a national electrical.
It's national? All right.
Yeah.
All right, good enough. Ted, did you have any more?
I had two more things. I had a question, well, it's probably fine. I was just trying to understand. I'm into 104 through 107 battery charging station protection. And I understand what I think I understand what they're trying to do there. It seems for sure to me that if there's something freestanding, it needs, well, originally this got changed a little bit, I think. I can imagine if something were freestanding, say next to a driveway, but not in a garage, that there might be some protection required from a car backing into it and having an electrical shocking.
But yeah, yes, but this was added in by public safety with the thought,
Yeah,
this would comply or apply to commercial properties.
well, that was my question. Is this just commercial or is it residential?
This one is really focused on commercial, section 312 of the International Fire Code.
Okay, because it didn't really say that, did it?
No, it doesn't. How about if we just say adequate commercial, wait a minute, battery charging station protection, so just kind of. Accordance with, shall be used in commercial. Commercial,
You would not want this requirement to apply to residential.
right,
No,
Well, a couple questions there. One is I did look at section 312. I thought I did of the fire code, and that was more or less describing the construction of bollards that I could say, but it didn't deal with more than that.
Planning Commission Wednesday, February 21, 2024, this is a regular meeting. Roll call. Oh, it's PM. Here. So the idea was.
No idea what it does.
I'm gonna go from the-
Deja vu.
Oh my God. I hope that didn't get recorded.
Yeah. December 13, 2020.
Okay.
Did we get voted?
Paul makes the motion, Charlie Wilmot seconds it to approve the minutes, all in favor, raise your hands. Aye. Yes.
That's it.
Right. No, sorry.
I was ready to take over.
Ordinance language, do we have anyone online? So if you want to just give a quick summary, John.
Sorry, guys.
It's okay.
So that's not gonna,
Thank you, Shane.
yeah, wow. Glad you were here.
So I guess I was asking about, yeah, did this really apply to residential? I was thinking, if someone put one on a garage on a wall, you wouldn't think you'd have to do more than that. But then I was thinking if someone did put one outside next to a driveway, I don't know, like on a pole, a charging pole. Maybe it does make sense because you wouldn't want them to inadvertently
Back into it.
back their car into it. So I don't know. I just,
I would tend to leave it as is and let's see what happens.
okay.
So not specify commercial or residential.
Okay.
Okay.
And then a similar question with regard to residential versus commercial. A little bit for me was on the signage, it'd be 121 through 125 or and beyond. Just, I don't know these products well enough to know. The first part says that there's something about commercial use, but the voltage and amperage levels or safety information should be on every charging station. I don't know if that's normally on that or if it would look more like an outlet. So I didn't know if residential that was important or not. And then later on, there was something about the item G, line 129, about a phone number and contact information. Again, seemed to me more pertinent to commercial than residential. So that was my other kind of question about that.
I would think, yeah, a lot of this has to do with commercial, and what we could do is under F signage. We could probably just put commercial property only,
Well,
or non-residential, I would say, because it could apply to manufacturing and research and.
Non-residential.
facilities.
if I were putting one in my house, I'd like the signage there too. I think it's a general safety thing. To say, for instance, there's an emergency in the house or there's a fire in the house, it's there for the public safety people to see and understand. I just think it's appropriate in all circumstances to have people signage, but that's just my opinion.
Well, and voltage and amperage is interesting, but I'm not I don't have an electric vehicle, but I would assume that the Connect is fairly specific on this device. You can't plug just anything into it. So.
You're not going to be able to plug your vacuum cleaner in.
Right, so then I don't know if voltage and amperage, other than the inspection on the installation is so important for a resident to see. It's still required to have, I think, that cutoff switch next to it.
No, I agree with you, Commissioner, that this is really focused on, and so is G. It's really focused on the non-residential aspects of it.
And, I'm not familiar with what the electrical code requires, but some of these requirements could be stipulated
Could be.
already in the electric code.
I don't know. Okay, that was my question. I don't feel too strongly on that. I just didn't want to have things that could potentially be required of residents that went a little beyond what was necessary and could incur cost, or I don't know.
So line item number 124, which is number 2. Each electric vehicle change station shall be posted with signage indicating the space is only for electrical vehicle charging purposes. Is that for parking lots? Is that for, will there ever be street curbside parking spaces that you can plug
That would be
into?
a public policy by council. But those that you would find at a grocery store or a gas station, they typically will have a sign saying for electric vehicle parking only. Just to let people.
Can we say each electric vehicle charging station space in a parking lot?
I don't have an objection to that.
Yes, because earlier in the ordinance, I believe when it talks about non-commercial applications, that like if you've got an apartment complex and have one, I think it's up to their discretion whether they want to put a sign there and say electrical vehicles only or not, is what I understood from the ordinance earlier. So then when it got to this section, it seemed to say that every space that's electric could only be for electric vehicles, but I thought in a more of a private situation, private ownership, you could decide what you wanted to do.
Well, I think in your own house, but I would think that in an apartment complex, the management company would want to specify. If they're going to invest in 3 or 4 EV stations, they're going to want to make sure that people that have the cars can charge there.
Yeah. Would you leave that to their discretion? Let's say you had a small complex and there were 4 people.
Yeah.
There are no households that have an electric vehicle.
I think that would be at the discretion of.
Yeah, so maybe that's
zoning.
So not put in a parking lot?
I think, we're diving into the details too much. We can't. I can't give you every scenario where these are going to be used.
Right, it's just if I read this as a residential thing and I thought, anyway, I suppose it's just common sense.
Well, I had thought about should the whole section 1719, beginning at line 82, should that whole section be dedicated to commercial development standards and be just titled commercial development standards? Now, down on line 96 or so, there is a reference to residential, but as we've talked about all of this, pretty much everything does, I think, just apply to commercial applications. Maybe we should just make it commercial applications and that would clear up some of these questions. Because again, like I say, I think the electric code, when you go to put one in your house, there's gonna be certain requirements that the electric code is gonna make to guarantee that it's, you know, an up to snuff and safe installation.
Well, John, what do you think about changing that to commercial? Is there anything, I think you could get rid of, lighting shall be provided where an electric charging station is installed. Unless charging is for daytime purposes, or then you could just get rid of residential zone properties.
But if we have like a multi-residential apartment building, like we can't designate commercial when it comes to,
Yeah, commercial or multifamily.
yeah.
Well, you don't even want to use the term commercial because you don't want to exclude industrial properties.
Oh, right.
So
Non-residential, is it?
you would, yeah, you would say non-residential.
Single family residential.
Yeah.
You just.
Because that's a little awkward.
All right, so I guess general is better, but I do have a question on 108, number 3. The first line is electric vehicle charging stations in non-residential zoning districts gets deleted. Shall be installed not less than 10 feet from any building or structure and have a means of emergency power disconnect. In non-residential structures, did we mean in non-residential zoning?
No, you could have a non-residential structure in a residential area.
Okay. So in other words, that everything has, so is this true of residential areas where you have to be 10 feet from any building on your residential property?
Not less than.
No.
Not less than. I mean, that's why they have to submit a plot plan to the zoning administrator so that you can
Close.
determine where they're
Yeah.
at and look at the setbacks.
Okay.
I wanted to make a comment about the signage. Carolyn, I'm sorry. I wanted to comment about the signage, line 120, if we just took the sub paragraph or whatever you call it, 3, and move that up to number 1, wouldn't that cover what's required to be posted? Just be based on what the zoning administrator specifies?
Yeah, if you want to give the zoning administrator that type of latitude, that'd be fine.
And then if it's commercial, they can say, well, C2 and 3. And then if it's residential, she can say. Or can say whatever.
So are you proposing that we delete number 1?
I think 3 just moves up and becomes 1. So design
But it
specifications for
includes-
signage shall be obtained from the zoning administrator, and then 2. You know, because 2 and 3, I think, you know, if it's a residential, do we need all of that information? But it'll be based on what the zoning administrator requires.
Well, I would like I think to have it spelled out here makes sense. You know, that commercial use shall include hours of operation and fees, and I do think that identifying voltage amperage levels is a safety feature that should be there.
I agree.
So if it's
So
not
ultimately-
written in there, you know, that makes it clear, zoning administrator doesn't need to have that knowledge to remember who does what, it just spells it out in here.
I think it makes sense to leave that in there. You know, you trust your zoning administrator now, but you may have one in the future that we talk about that with sign committee often.
We talk about that at sign committee, how some, you know, if Lisa isn't here any longer, we may not feel that way anymore. So to me, it makes sense to leave it in.
I agree that it should be in,
I
but
just want to move it.
the hierarchy of it.
So 3 should become 1. 1 should become 2 and 2 should become 3.
I would think.
Okay.
If I was reading through it, I would be like, well, I need to talk to them first and then go through the next numbers.
So I guess, John, to the signage though, obviously, if you were in like a small apartment complex, I'll say something. And it was posted electrical vehicles only, but no one had one,
Then they could.
no one would care, and who's gonna bother them, right? Right.
We made a determination when we were putting this together that these spots would not affect the overall requirement for parking.
Right.
So it's really up to the owner of the parking lot to establish whether it's exclusively electric or
Yeah.
whatever.
All right,
Okay, any other comments from the commission? I take a motion to,
Madam Chair, just let me go
Yeah.
through them again.
okay,
On page line 56, we're going to put a comma, and just provided it is in compliance with the electrical code.
right, you don't need the comma, just delete the period.
Wanted to test your editorial.
What?
I just wanted to test your editorial ability. And then they're really, with the exception of signage on F, we're gonna move 3 to 1, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 3. Those are the only comments. Okay, I'll make those before it goes to council.
so I make a motion to approve the electrical vehicle charging station ordinance with the changes that were just stated.
Okay, I need a second.
Second that one.
Okay, Ted Paul makes the motion. Rick Newman makes the second. And roll call vote,
Robson,
yes.
Wilmot,
Yes.
Braddock,
Yes.
Buck,
Yes.
Detmer,
Yes.
McSweeney,
Yes.
Meridian,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Okay, motion. I mean, ordinance language moves on to city council. All right, new business, Resort Township Master Plan Review. John?
Members of the commission, there's a letter, an agenda memo that dates back to December 20th, 2023, and was for the meeting in January, which was canceled. Resort Township revised their community master plan, and they had, under the statute, they did send out a letter to all of the surrounding municipalities for their 63-day review. And the city did receive the letter and they sent it to me. I reviewed and read through their document. And then I wrote them a letter regarding what my observations were relative to the plan. And I didn't find anything in conflict with the city's master plan. And I just emphasized that if they do a study for US 31, that I recommended that they include the city in on that study. And since I sent the letter in at their January meeting, they went ahead and they adopted their master plan. So
Okay,
this is really for information only for. the
Okay.
commission.
did you want us to make a motion? Let's see, what was it? To accept and place on file
I
the
think that'd
plan?
be appropriate just to accept and place on file.
Okay. Did anybody have any discussion beforehand? All right, I'll take a motion to accept and place on file.
Well, I'll make a motion to accept and place on file the Resort Township Master Plan as presented.
Okay. Ted Paul made the motion, Doug Buck supports. All in favor, raise your hands, aye. Yeah. Motion, it's unanimous. All right, moving on to Planning Commission Annual Report. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Is there anything you wanna introduce?
The one thing that I would like the planning commission to take a look at is actually on the last page. Which is the 2024 recommended planning commission initiatives. The purpose of the annual report is to stay in compliance with Public Act 33 of 2002, which is the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. And they require a planning commission on a calendar year to summarize what they did, but then also to provide in this case, the city council, an idea of what your proposed work program may be for 2024. And some of the things that we had talked about over the last 6 months was obviously commence work on a new zoning code. To explore, and this comes out of the master plan, and I know that it's come up on a couple of comments at the PC, was explore the expansion of the National Register of Historic Places districts. That's on page 65 and 76 of the master plan. And investigate the feasibility of establishing a neighborhood enterprise zone. That came out of our discussion on housing quality, taking a look at some of the areas in the community, primarily in the southwest quadrant of the community, where an NEZ would be appropriate as a form of tax incentives for homeowners to make improvements to their property. Page 79 of the master plan says investigate improvement strategies for the US 31 corridor from Charlevoix Avenue to the bridge. That was discussed a couple of months ago as a potential initiative. And then we've also discussed updating or preparing a non-motorized plan, which shows up in 5 pages of the master plan under some of the various goals. So those were the initiatives going through the minutes in my notes that the PC has brought up over, throughout 2023 that I wanted to list as a 2024 initiative. So these are really the ones that I really want the planning commission to weigh on. If it's something that you want to do, something that maybe we delete for another time, it's really at your discretion, but it's kind of a summation of what I've heard since April.
Of course.
Good.
So obviously we can add and modify this. This is at this point,
Yeah,
because our next agenda item is to talk about some more of this thing.
this is really your initiatives as a board that you would like to explore in 2024. Once you revise this and you approve it, then it'll go as a communication to city council. So they can see the things that you did in 2023 and what you're contemplating on doing in 2024. So it's up to you folks.
So below that, it's administrative actions by the Office of Planning and Zoning. It says 2024. Should that be 2023? Where it lists what's been
Yes.
done? So is that something we want to discuss right now or move on?
It kind of goes hand in hand with the review of the master plan, action plan status.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I'm comfortable with it, realizing we can certainly add, at least it gives us some things we're gonna focus to at least discuss for sure, and then obviously the biggest one is the zoning code, but we can tackle other
oh yeah,
items too if we decide tonight or later.
So this isn't. This looks like a to-do list to me, that if we keep them in there, it means we're going to do them.
it's kind of your what you anticipate your work program for 2024. It doesn't mean you have to accomplish them all.
Mhm.
But like I said, these are the things that I pulled out of the minutes or out of my notes from prior meetings.
Right.
So, I mean,
I would think a good faith discussion for sure at a minimum, and then like you said, maybe on some item we say that's for another date. Maybe we're spending a lot of time on the zoning code, who knows?
Well, it does say recommended initiatives. It doesn't, it's not set in stone.
Right.
That's
And
true.
as we go along through the year, I think we can feel free to revisit it and set more immediate goals and priorities for the next meeting or the next 3 meetings or whatever the case might be. I do think that if we engage in the zoning review, the way that we've been discussing for some time now, once we get started in that, that will be pretty all consuming. And these others would be nice to have presentations to understand what's what for future potential action items. But the emphasis really is on number one.
Mhm.
That's where the
Okay,
monumental work needs to be done.
okay, moving on.
Before,
Go ahead.
if I may, I would just, I think it's important for us as a board to come up to have consensus on those items that we want to try to target this year and also prioritizing those items. If I was staff, I think I'd find some value in terms of understanding what those items are and the priority in terms of scheduling. And I don't think we've necessarily done that. And so perhaps it's a future agenda item or it's a future discussion for tonight, but I would like to see us come to a consensus on as a board, what those items are.
That's fine with me.
What's the commission's, shall we do it? Get it done now, or shall we have a separate meeting where these things are listed and we're prepared for discussion?
Well, it's partially our next agenda item.
Let me look at our next agenda item.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I assumed this was part of the annual report, but it ends here for that, okay. I misunderstood that.
Oh.
All right, so. What? So why don't we set that aside and move on to the master plan, action plan status for the year ending 2023.
So do we need any kind of motion, or are you suggesting we might be amending this after the next discussion?
Yeah, I think we. Or we could just approve it as is and then go back and. I was just thinking after we go through this, then we could go back to
The annual report,
recommended.
Last year.
I wouldn't, my recommendation to the commission would be not to approve the annual report until you're comfortable with the 2024 initiatives.
Okay,
Right. So that's why I said so.
So set it aside.
all right.
The master plan action status is something that I wanted to do primarily for the planning commission, because I mentioned to you before that the master plan action strategy is extremely detailed and has a lot of projects that I don't know if the administrative staff in total has the capacity to do. But I wanted to go through it, and all the department heads did weigh in on where they were at on this. So you have a pretty good snapshot of which activities have been administrative staff has engaged, which ones are ongoing and which ones haven't had any action associated with them. When the 5 years is up for the master plan, it's not that you're going to revise it in 5 years, but you're required after 5 years to evaluate if you want to make some revisions, and usually the revisions are in the action plan. Because I'd like to keep this updated, so when you get to that 5 year total, 5 years, you know which ones that you are working on and that you maybe need to continue, and which ones there's no action associated with it. Then we have to ask the question, should those remain on the action schedule, because are they going to get done or not? I really personally, when I write master plans, the action plan is usually focused on 5 years, and it's focused on administrative capability and planning commission capability. And typically we only end up with maybe 15 action steps for that 5 year program to give the planning commission and the administration the time that they need to actually get those major projects done. So that's why I went through this primarily to establish a benchmark on where we're at. And when you get to the 5 year time frame, we have something to review to figure out what needs to stay, what needs to get revised. So this is just kind of was my way of evaluating where you're currently at. And I was thankful to the administrative staff for reviewing their appropriate parts and then adding the narrative. Because you can see that some of this stuff is getting done, but there are other projects that there hasn't been any action or activity on yet. So this is really kind of like for everybody's information only.
So kind of a couple comments and questions.
Sure.
One thing we didn't get here, and I don't know if it was a huge oversight, but I think would be helpful when you think about it. When I reviewed the list in our master plan document, so all these agenda action items have short-term and medium-term, and sometimes it's a both designation. So that's not on here. So someone who just, maybe someone on city council picks this up and looks at it. No action, no action, no action, no action. Well, one thing is, a lot of these items are medium term, not short term. Medium term was defined as 6 to 15 years, short term 1 to 5 years. So it'd be nice for me to have a condensed list of the short term and to look at that and say, okay, these were the ones we were going to try to get to in 5 years.
Well, I can add a column that's short term and then I can
Right.
sort them by short term. What's in the, refresh my memory, Commissioner Paul, how is the master plan? Is it short, medium, long?
Short and medium.
Just
And
short and medium.
some say ST, MT, and some are ST/MT. Both. So.
Okay,
But that-
we can sort them that way.
That's really,
Yeah, it's a good way of doing it.
So then the other thing I think for me personally, and again, not to trying to be too sensitive here, but. I mean, you might look at this document and say, well, there's always, let's get the short term list. Now we're down to less than 100. And you know, we very quickly realize that although the planning commission worked extensively on this master plan. As you pointed out, a lot of this falls on staff, just like city council doesn't go out and build the road. They decide the road needs to be built and get the funding. So like there's things in here like calculating the tree canopy, repairing the existing trail on the resort bluffs of the railway. We're obviously not going to do that. So on that list, then if you started to mark which items potentially involve planning commission action. Now we've got a list of short-term items. The other ones, I mean, city staff's gonna have to
Yeah, I
decide.
mean, I agree with
That
that.
would be more clear. Okay, these are things we might need an ordinance change or whatever, a policy.
Because some of the the action activities are actually kind of capital improvement related.
Right, right.
They're not planning related in
Right.
terms of other planning
Right.
initiatives that you need.
So I wondered for everyone if that would be helpful. I mean, I marked mine out for it's such a long list though, it becomes.
I was at 166. Yeah,
Yeah, but the STs, you get down to something manageable, the short terms.
let me add a column next to the number.
Yeah,
And I'll have a code, short S or SM or ST, whatever I call it.
yeah.
And then I'll sort it. And then I can give you a list of what just.
You can either check off or vice versa, whichever way you want to do it. Which ones really don't involve, like we've given direction to calculate a tree canopy, but we're not going to go out after the meeting and Charlie's got a block and.
You might recall that the July 2022 memo that I wrote to the commission actually just dealt with those that were in the planning commission guardrails.
Yeah.
Okay, so that has already been sorted once.
Yeah,
So, and you might disagree with that sort, but
yeah. I mean,
that's
that's
that list.
John to do it and just,
Yeah, we have them all, we all have 163 here.
yeah.
Let's just add a couple another columns so we can cross tabulate them to find out exactly where we're at.
Are the numbers that are associated with these on the left column there, are those meant to be priority or are those just?
Those are the actual numbers out of the master plan action program.
Oh, I see.
So they have a listing at the back of it and they took all the action strategies and listed them. They're not actually numbered there, but these are the exact numbers as they
Yeah,
apply.
that's what I did. I did not want to change the numbering.
Right.
So I used exactly what was out of the action
Yeah.
plan in terms of their order. So,
Right, so to continue this discussion, you're going to prepare the list with short-term items that are directly related to the planning commission.
correct.
And then even depending on how much you want to do going into that meeting, if you see a couple and then some comment from you about,
Well, what I'll do, and I don't want to volunteer anybody. But since Commissioner Paul and Commissioner Wilmot have already kind of explored this, let me reorganize the table, do the sorting. Let me send it to both of you via
Okay.
email. You guys take a look at it and see if you agree or if you want some other changes before the next PC meeting.
okay.
Okay?
So the short term, medium term is pretty clear, but more on the, is it a planning commission item or a,
Correct.
yeah,
So then the three of us can agree if it's a planning commission item or not.
but we need your help too, because.
Yeah, I know.
you may, yeah,
I'll give you my first.
Yeah.
I'll take a look at it myself, but I would like the two of you to take a look at it. And if the three of us agree, then I think we got a pretty wholesome document for the rest of the planning.
right. And then when we come to the meeting, you've had a chance to look at it more, and then if I or someone wants to do something, you have a little more idea of the potential time and resources involved.
Correct. And then the other part of it is if you want to hold off on the action plan, then based on the results of that meeting next month, then you guys, the planning commission can pick out which 2024 initiatives you want to put on the list. So that way everything's being tied together.
Okay,
Make sense?
yeah,
Isn't there a regulatory time frame that we're supposed to submit that,
Beginning of the year.
so?
Yep.
So March is still the beginning of the year?
Well, we were gonna have it submitted in February, but we.
I understand, but,
We're a month behind.
but we can hold it up for these four initiatives?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have some planning commissions that don't even do the annual report.
yeah,
Well, and we have not done this.
we didn't always do them in the.
Yeah, well,
We did an annual report, but
But
it,
it wasn't anything
no,
else.
it didn't look like this.
Yeah.
No.
when I do training, it's one of the planning essentials. That's one of the things I say, would any planning commissioner raise their hand that did your annual report? And they just look at me like, what are you talking? So,
Yeah,
but I know that you've done them before. And, but Lisa and I worked on the format of this, and I do have to say that I was very impressed with the amount of conferences and training that members of the planning commission do. Well, everybody's kind of, there's a lot of people listed in here, and it's pretty impressive, actually.
Well, that raises an interesting question, maybe not time or place, but we've all been getting solicitations for continuing education for this year. And I frankly don't know how to deal with that until we know what kind of training continuous education may result from our effort with the zoning review.
or anything you've got planned out.
Oh, yeah,
Is-
don't put all your eggs in the zoning code. You've got to do other things besides the zoning ordinance. And don't limit your training just to zoning related items, because the ones that you win and you have on this list is really, you've got some really good ones. Zoning conflict in the public meeting, somebody went to a class on preservation planning, another one on ethics training. I mean, you need to do that.
Well, that begs the next question is there any budget for it this year in the city budget?
We will talk to the city manager.
And then also then, do you have any
Can we
plans?
can we have parameters at some point so that we can make these commitments?
Yeah, I
Because
think
it's-
typically what happens on other
There's a whole
PCs.
category of wonderful things this spring that we need to take action on soon, I think, if we
Usually
want to
at-
participate.
My recommendation would be how other commissions work is that if someone gets a publication or a notice of training, they would bring it up at the planning commission. And the planning commission as a group talks about it, sees if it's something that is of interest to the commission. And then we find out who is going to volunteer to go, and then we will work with the city manager to see if there is a budget available for them. And, there's a lot of factors that go into it.
And then do you foresee though bringing any speaker or having any educational opportunity as a group we might do this year? We've done that in the past.
Yeah,
sometimes.
as a matter of fact, I know that Emmett County is going to have they're gonna be doing a round robin with coastal communities in the county on shoreline resiliency. But they're gonna come to you for that,
Okay,
okay? And I'll be doing it because they've asked me to do the presentation at the various communities, so you'll be getting that, they're coming to you. I know that a number of years ago, that the city was a host for MAP training for planning and zoning, and other communities came here for that training, and that's a great way of doing it. Would be that one of the communities serve as a host and everybody from the surrounding communities gets to come in for the training. So you're not paying for travel and it's just an evening and, you know, that type of thing. But if you wanna, if there's some topic that you're all interested in, let me research it and see if the MAP, Michigan Association of Planning, has a training module on that.
Okay.
Okay. But I have to tell you that when Lisa sent over the list of all the training activities, it was pretty impressive. It really is. So you guys have done a nice job with the training. So that's what I have. I mean, that's all of the,
So in regard to this action list and things we want to accomplish and that, I do want to make a public comment that sometimes the perception is that the planning commission only meets once a month. And I worked on the master plan. I don't know if we had 20 meetings that year. We met twice a month, almost every month. And we have the ability to do that. Obviously, you've got some subcommittees working on things too. So I just want, when people wonder what the planning commission does or can do, that we do, have done, and will do, I think, if necessary, to what needs to be done.
yeah, we're gonna keep a attendance record of all of the commission meetings and all of the subcommittees that everybody's on. So in the annual report, we'll have the attendance list so people can see all of the work effort that the PC has completed for that year.
Okay. Did anybody have any comments on the 2023? All the activities? All right, so we're going to revisit this at the next meeting.
And we'll revisit the annual report.
Yes. Yeah. All right, moving on to public comment. Does anybody want to make a public comment? Is anyone online?
We have one online, but let's see. Nothing. Mhm.
So nobody, all right, so we move on to commissioner comments. Charlie?
That came up fast, but I think I'm ready. I perhaps we'll get an update later on from staff about this grant. The $50,000 and. Are you planning on speaking to that, the memo that we received about the grant? And the training and how it will be applied and what the plans are for that? Okay, then I probably don't have a comment till after I hear the updates.
Okay, but commissioner comments are before updates.
I know.
All right, Ted?
I heard a little bit, read a little bit in that city council packet with regard to potential language that was in the grant. Was there flexibility? We heard the answer that was, we actually got the email on that there was flexibility. I just wanted to point out, as I was reviewing for this meeting for the action items, for instance, number 119 on your list here, has reviewed the zoning ordinance requirements for lot size, minimum house square footage, building height, density, setbacks, parking requirements, and accessory dwelling units allowance to remove barriers for the creation of additional workforce housing options. Review the zoning ordinance for these things. I think that would have been perfect language because it's already been approved by everyone, and that's what we're going to do, review it and decide what to apply. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Okay, any other comments? All right, moving up to updates. Do you have any, John?
Not in particular, no.
Okay, Ted mentioned something about the work program, and I think this sheet that we received probably is a good start to understanding what the process is going to be.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is there any elaboration on that, or do we have, is there a schedule for the zoning ordinance committee now, or?
I have not put a detailed schedule together yet. It's really gonna, I was talking to the chairman before the meeting. probably really gonna kick off with the subcommittee meetings starting in April, because in March. I would like to coordinate with the city manager a joint session with the city council and planning commission. In order to talk about big topic items relative to the zoning ordinance. And I don't want the committee to get started until we have that meeting, so we really understand the parameters that we're going to be working with. So.
Just for the record, I wonder if the chair could just explain what we received tonight, no one would know. It wasn't,
Oh, well,
just briefly.
I just, we received our current zoning ordinance.
For the committee members.
Oh, just for the committee members. Okay, so this is what we're gonna be, this will be our handbook. And then the extra sheet, which everyone probably, you gave it to everyone?
I gave that to everybody.
Okay.
It's kind of like a preliminary work program. In terms of the various steps that we would use.
Actually, if I may, can I get confirmation here? I guess, from our two meetings, would have been 2 meetings ago, I expressed a concern about, having, have a pre-consensus, in the subcommittee and the concerns of that and the value of the education process for the whole board. And I kind of, from my notes, I remember the subcommittee being referred to as a more of a wordsmithing committee, that there would be a key component of the full board would be education, that the direction and decisions were to be made initially at the board level, and then the wordsmithing was to take place at the committee. And I just want to get confirmation that is still the direction.
The way the process is worked on the work program is that the policies that would be looked at by the planning commission and by the committee would hopefully come out of the joint session with the city council. And part of that joint session would be an educational component in terms of updating everybody on what some of the current trends are in zoning and what some of the other communities are doing. So everybody has an idea of what some of the options are.
Can I make a comment, John? And when we do that, we often, when the training I've had, we're looking for any areas where zoning is a hindrance to potentially housing options. And
Well, it's not, it's housing.
Yeah.
That's usually.
I mean, one big component of this,
Yeah.
the housing component, if you will. And obviously, we're fairly built out in Petoskey, so we're dealing with a built out community. A lot of these, if you could, when you present this, I mean, when I go to conferences and when I hear things, there's often a pre-discussion about, so we just a little reality check on, maybe it's ADUs, maybe it's something else. What's the likely impact of those? Are these home runs? Are these little things you can do? And when I've been to a lot of these things, we're looking for ways we can tweak. It might be lot size density, park, whatever it is, but put in the context of a discussion where there's a realization that, these are not, don't get the idea that every housing problem is solved here and then it's nirvana. Yeah,
It's not going to be.
I just wanted to say that.
I mean, that's kind of the fallacy of a lot of this, is that everybody thinks that redoing the zoning code is going to solve the housing problem. It's not. It's going to be taking a look at maybe possibly removing some barriers
Right.
that really inhibit housing. But you're not going to be able to solve the housing problem by being just a single family neighborhood community.
Right.
The way that you're going to solve the housing problem is much like what's happening with Maple Block in the lofts at Lumber. In terms of projects that are focused on apartments that are focused on providing housing for the 80% to 120% AMI incomes. You can't solve it with single family lots, because even the smallest single family lot will accommodate an 800 to 1,100 square foot house. And at current construction rates of $300 a square foot, you're talking about $350,000 to $425,000 homes that's not a house that's for entry level families or young professionals.
Mhm.
So those are the things that we talked about,
Mhm.
but there are other things in the city here that you need to take a look at. One of them is the possibility of consolidating some zoning districts. That's a great conversation, and that's a policy conversation that should be had at the planning commission level. So yeah, there will be some policy issues that need to be discussed by the planning commission. And then those policies then get written into the language, which is the function or the responsibility of the subcommittee. So.
I'm still not quite sure I understand why the subcommittee is meeting before. If its primary mission is to wordsmith, I'm not quite sure I understand why the subcommittee is meeting before the topics are broached by the full board.
Well, some of the topics, the big topics that are gonna be that are gonna be discussed by the full board are really topics relative to consolidation of zoning districts, different housing typologies that you want in the city, single family, duplex, triplex, quadplex, what the planning commission's comfort level is with density, okay? What the planning commission's level is relative to things like minimum, maximum parking requirements. Do you want to allow bicycle parking and give people a break on surface parking lots? Those are the big policy issues. The subcommittee is the one that actually drafts the language. And to draft the language, I had mentioned this before 2 months ago, drafting the language with the entire planning commission, we would not get done with the zoning ordinance for 3 or 4 years.
So what would be the first, and I don't mean to be too objectionable, but so what's what would be the first meeting?
The first big step.
For the subcommittee, what's the
Well,
first topic of the subcommittee?
We're not gonna know that until we have the joint meeting with the planning commission and the city
So
council.
that's before.
Well, that's
'cause I
right.
thought you'd said that the subcommittee was meeting.
No, the subcommittee
was
will
gonna
not
initiate
meet.
the process.
They will not meet until after we have that joint meeting.
I think, Doug, I hear what you're saying, because I'm often of that bent, and I happen to be on the subcommittee, so, you know, you're in a, but I think it would keep the spirit that the planning commission as a whole makes the decisions, not some subcommittee. That maybe the subcommittee will make an attempt to get things down on paper, and then everyone who wasn't on the subcommittee will actually, it's sometimes easier to think and look at things on paper than just have this amorphous discussion that goes in circles. But if we keep the spirit that when the subcommittee is not making the decision, it's the whole board. We're trying to get some ideas down that we think reflect maybe where we're going. Is that helpful or not?
I understand exactly.
Yeah.
I understand the efficiency. My concern is, in my experience with subcommittees, is it begins to, there's an
Right.
education process that occurs through there.
Right.
And some decisions are made at the subcommittee level in terms of policy and how that is presented to the full board that, hey, we, and the subcommittee, we talked about this, and at the subcommittee, we talked about A, B, and C. But there was a process that went through that subcommittee, an educational process, and there was other options that were discussed that were given at the point, maybe an equal priority. And that part of the discussions, education process is the other commissioners don't have the opportunity. And then at the same time, the outcome that comes out of that subcommittee, there's already a consensus of 3 board members. And so those are my concerns. And I'm not saying that I have concern that any one of the 3 of you are going to build a block, a voting block, and do not what's best. But I do feel that my primary purpose on this board is to be involved in the zoning process above all other things. And I do feel that by having the subcommittee, I'm not able to be part of the entire process.
What do other people think? I'm just curious.
I think it's all going to get covered in the end anyway. I mean, I think it makes sense to at least get some initial something down on paper to bring back to all of us as a whole commission. You just looking at how we've handled, the electric vehicles ordinance. We've gone over this thing like 3 or 4 times now. And wordsmithed it to death. In detail. Meeting after meeting, but I mean, and we've made reasonable revisions, but I think in the end, the process is gonna allow us all to. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Doug, about education and being involved in the detail brings a person along and maybe has the level of understanding that a commissioner who's not on the committee doesn't get to take advantage of.
Well, if you take a look, the work, I didn't, the work program that I handed out was for information, so we could have a conversation later. But the work program is set up at the very beginning to have the joint session to talk about trends, education, and then have an open discussion between council and the planning commission. I don't. When I've worked on these ordinances before, the big trap is that the planning commission goes off on its own. And when they finally prepare the draft and then it goes before a city council, some councils have issues with some of the major components of the zoning code. And then it's like, we have to go back to the workshop and we have to start over again. And I don't want that to happen. So I want the council to be upfront along with the planning commission. I want an honest conversation about what both groups think are important that need to be addressed in the zoning code. That's the policy point part of it. Once we get into the major components, technically, I mean, take a look at your current zoning ordinance. 75% of it is nothing but statutory. There's really 25% of a zoning code that is public policy. That's a narrative or a text document that really paints what the public policy is. That's 25%, probably the most important part of the zoning code. Once we have the joint session, we talk about the big issues. We talk about what the guardrails are going to be. Then the committee gets together and starts putting some of that on paper. It goes to the planning commission for them to take a look at and give a consensus. Are we on the right direction? The next step is then we take a break and we have a community open house and we share with the community what some of the big strokes are going to be, or what we're thinking the big strokes are going to be, and we want their input. Okay, and then we go to the next part and we do it again. And then when we get towards the end of the document, or at least the major component of the document that talks about land uses, talks about housing types, talks about lot dimensions, talks about consolidated zoning districts if we have any. Then we have another open house to reaffirm if we're on the right track or not. And then after that, we move really into what I call the statutory provisions, which are things like, how are we going to do site plan review? How's the zoning board of appeals going to be constituted? What's the definition section? Those are the mundane aspects of the zoning code. But the fun stuff, if there is fun with zoning, is in the front part. And then the commission would be brought those various aspects to take a look at the public policy and come up with a consensus on direction. I plan on, as part of this, Cynthia doesn't know, but about every 3 months, I would like the chairman, and I'll work with the chairman on it, but I'd like the chairman to present the council a very short PowerPoint in terms of where we're at and where we're going. So the council's brought along at the same time. So this is going to be a very interactive process between the planning commission and the city council, but I can assure the planning commissioners that you'll be involved in the policy making part of it.
John, and just a question too, ultimately, I mean, I'm not quite saying, I mean, obviously, we're totally on odds with city council, but city council can make some amendments and changes. They don't need to, they have that ability, correct?
Oh, yeah, yes.
So, I mean, they have some latitude to, hopefully we're close to what we can all agree on, and they still have some ability to make changes. And
They do, and what usually happens through a major zoning rewrite is you have 3 distinct parties. You have the planning commission, you have the elected officials, and you have the community. And over the years, it is best to bring all 3 groups together as you're going down the journey. So when you get to the end, there's no big surprises or no one of the groups has an issue with what you're doing. Because it's a very time consuming process and costly. And when you get down to the end, you want to make sure that the planning commission, the council and the community are pretty much all on the same page. Now, yeah, you are going to have some revisions. You're going to have some tweaking at the end, but there should be no big surprises when we get down to the final draft. I mean, that's the goal.
Charlie?
The way that you've outlined it sounds hunky-dory, really good. But I don't think it really addresses the concern that I heard from Doug. What I heard from Doug was that as a member of the commission, he'll feel kind of outside the intimacy of the discussions and the knowledge that the committee is having as they are actually crafting the text for the, and a perfect example of that is the sign committee. Because I don't have a clue what they're doing, and they've been working at it for 9 months, and they will present something to us and we'll be asked to approve it. That can't happen with the zoning, in my opinion. I agree with that.
Mhm.
And I'm not trying to pick on the sign committee.
But we have dissected sign committee recommendations
Mhm.
and
I understand, but we're not involved in that intimate process that they're involved in of learning and developing, and we're outside of that. I understand his concern. In my opinion, the way to break that is to really take your fine scenario for how this thing flows and make sure that everything that the committee does is fully transparent to the members of the planning commission on a regular basis.
Mhm.
Now, that may not be enough to address your concerns, but that certainly would be a good start. Because we know that the sign commission is doing, the committee is doing a lot of good work. And we're told it's coming, but that's all we know. So we're not given updates as to the level of input and work and what's being, we don't know where they are. And that can't happen with zoning. I don't, that wouldn't be satisfactory. We can't go 3 months with the committee wordsmithing and not have any idea what they're saying, what they're putting down on paper.
You wouldn't go 3 months. Whatever we do will get presented at each planning commission meeting, whatever progress we've made. And you'd probably be asking for feedback. I would think. So it's not like we're gonna lock ourselves in a room for 3 months and then come out. It'll just be an ongoing discussion. I mean, when Amy was doing things, she would do a lot of the writing and there wasn't a subcommittee, we would all give our opinion. And then she would gather that and, and create the copy.
It seems to me that when you look at the something this large, that there would be some priorities that you would kind of maybe target, if that's consolidation of zones or if that's the square footage.
Mhm.
And there would be or if it's a joint meeting or if it's us, there's an education piece that we talked about, maybe our current, what we currently have, what are the best practices, pros and cons.
Mhm.
And there would be a sense of direction that the board would come to with the consensus.
Mhm.
And then the subcommittee would then put that consensus down in writing,
Mhm.
then bring it back for interpretation. My sense of it is, it's a little bit backwards here, the opposite, the other way around in this case. That the discussion of, and we may get a recap of that,
Mhm.
but the sense of setting direction, which can always be changed, I understand that, but it's the sense of directions are going to be set in the subcommittee.
No, I don't think so.
I think it happens first, we talk about the big
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah.
As
First
the
step one.
planning commission. And then
So-
those of us on the committee are listening and gonna take that all into
So
consideration.
what is the first, so the subcommittees meeting, I'm still not entirely clear, the subcommittees meeting first?
No,
No,
we're not meeting, the subcommittee would not meet until after the joint meeting with the planning commission and the city council.
Can I add another step in there?
What's that?
the joint meeting with council. And then a planning commission meeting
Mhm.
to dissect it further, and then the subcommittee.
I don't have a problem.
Does that help?
Yeah, I think I feel like I have expressed my views and concerns and, my sense is that I may be in the minority here.
Doug, I think what you're articulating is exactly what we're thinking about. Is that the big picture items
Okay.
would be discussed publicly at the planning commission and city council level. The subcommittee is basically tasked with taking that direction and putting it in writing. And then bringing it back to the planning commission, just like we did with the EV ordinance and the short-term rental ordinance. For the planning commission and to dig into it and give us additional comments and revisions. But somebody's got to be tasked with taking the idea and putting it into some narrative format so people then can read it and respond to it. And that's what the subcommittees.
And what is the, there was, this grant money, is there a different consultant involved too?
No, me.
Oh, you, it's,
We're working directly with you.
okay.
Yeah.
So there's not another.
Matt, did you wanna?
Well,
say something?
I was just going to say, if you look at the order. The first thing we're doing is we are meeting as one planning commission with city council. And then breaking out into the subcommittee. And like Charlie said, I think if we have good communication out of that committee, here's what we came up with, this is why. We should be good. I agree with Doug, there is value in all of us going through that process, but when you look at the timeline, 12 to 14 months. I don't see that being possible any other way than the way it is written up in this outline.
Yeah, I mean, the process works and we just have to have a couple of people that can work on creating the narrative. So the rest of the group can read the narrative and give their comments.
Right.
That's really what,
But that communication piece
yeah,
is huge.
yeah, it can be a standing agenda item every month, basically the update on where the zoning code's at. And then if there's any sections that need to be reviewed, then the sections would be reviewed at the planning commission level.
One thing that doesn't seem to be at all a bone of contention is the joint educational meeting with council. Specifically, what are your thoughts on that and or city manager's thoughts on how quickly that can take place? Because I think we're all ready to look at our calendars. The question is, how do we go about doing that?
I would get with the city manager and we'd start taking a look at calendars. I don't know what the council agenda is or what their activities are. And we have to compare both groups to find out when we have that magic date that we can get the majority of both groups together. The last one I did, we did it on a Saturday morning from 9 to 11:30. In order not to conflict with a lot of evening meetings. Seemed to work out well. Everybody was more informal. It wasn't we sat in a workroom, not on the dais. Everybody sat around a table, talked about the issues, discussed what was important for the community, what everybody wanted to get out of the rewrite. And we kind of came away with a kind of an agenda of topics to look at, and it kind of formed what the framework of the code was going to be.
Is that just the structure? Is there some structure to that meeting? So there's some trigger, some topics, some headliners written down so people are kind of thinking going into it, or is it all just?
One of the things that we go over is the zoning toolkit that's prepared by MAP. And I also kind of give a rundown of what some of the zoning trends are around the country and other communities, just to kind of start the conversation. So everybody's thinking, about different ideas. So it's kind of like a brainstorming session with both groups to really try to figure out exactly what's going to be acceptable in the code. I don't want to spend the planning commission's time going down a path that the city council is not gonna buy into when we have it drafted. So that's why all three groups are informed throughout the process and they meet. So when we get down to the final draft, we don't have any one of the three groups objecting to what's in the code.
Did everyone on the board receive a copy of that toolkit last summer?
I did. Do you want,
I'm not sure.
I don't,
I don't recall.
okay, should we re-up that? Who sent that out? The person, was it Amy?
No.
Was it you?
Toolkit just came out about 9 months ago.
Right.
Right,
July, I think.
Yeah, it's an electronic,
And send it on the
okay, could you send that to everybody?
And we probably at the same
I
time,
got my
ask
Yeah.
the manager if he could send it out to council as well,
Mhm.
so.
Yep. All right, anything else? I call this meeting adjourned at 7:16 PM.